first element of exploring or implementing a place-based stewardship education project or program is to scan your community. This exploratory stage will ensure that your efforts are grounded in the places that are most accessible and relevant to you and your students. Your efforts begin with the local environment, exploring its features as well as its role in the history, traditions, aspirations, culture, economy, literature, and art of your students' neighborhoods and communities. Place-based stewardship education can build on students' personal experiences and associations with place to explore the environment and engage in acts of stewardship. Focusing on neighborhoods may allow students to scan their places on a daily basis. They are more readily recognize issues within the places they experience daily that need the attention of the whole community. Scanning the community can involve a class exploration of place, assignments to make and record observations outside of school, or a combination of the two. The primary goal of this stage should be to explore, map, and catalog the community for potential stewardship opportunities. Encourage students to follow their curiosity. Challenge them to view their community as if everything is brand new to them. Allow students time and space to complete this step. Authentic place-based education involves building in the capacity for students to genuinely explore and engage with their surroundings. Sometimes, this is a new way of interacting with place for students, and like all skills, it's going to take practice, refinement, and plenty of encouragement.
The second element of the place-based stewardship education model is to choose an issue. Often, after completing a thorough scan of the community, you, or better yet, your students, will have developed a list of many local stewardship needs and ideas to choose from. Students should play an important role in choosing the issues that their project will focus on. This is a critical step of centering this approach in authentic student voice and choice. Teachers can help them choose wisely using tools such as Earth Force criteria-based decision-making process. As part of the process of developing decision criteria, teachers should consider in advance and include in materials for students any of the following criteria they deem important. What types of issues connect well to our curriculum? What types of issues and concerns are developmentally appropriate for my students? What partners are available to help us? What are current teaching and learning conditions? Given the constraints and opportunities of my current and anticipated situation, what types of projects seem feasible? During this stage, guide students through the decision-making process and consider what your capacity is to manage multiple student projects. Can small groups take on different projects of interest, or does the entire class need to come together around a single issue? Another critical component of this element is the need to consider issues and projects in a transparent way with students. As an educator, it is important that you share the limits, barriers, and unknowns of issues or projects with students. Help them understand the complexity of each issue or project, and let them know what may or may not be achievable. This is also a wonderful opportunity for you as the teacher to model being comfortable with not having all of the answers. Embrace the chance to share your unknowns with students, as how you might approach a stewardship-related issue may be completely outside of your expertise and experience. If this is the case, fear not. Here, you've identified a wonderful opportunity to model what to do when you don't have the answers and how you might go about pursuing those answers.
Once you've identified the stewardship issue that you and your students will be addressing, it's time to move on to element 3 of the place-based stewardship education model, developing partnerships. Your community is filled with experts connected to the stewardship issue that you're working on, even if you don't know who they are. Community partners can offer knowledge and expertise, historical and current data sets for students to analyze, direction on the type of action project best suited to your timeline and students, access to a field site, equipment opportunities to publicize your work, a home for the data you collect, and opportunities for students to learn about careers related to the stewardship issue. These experts are often asked to come into classrooms for things like career days, where they may explain this type of job they do. In this context, you and your students will be consulting them with a real-world issue that they may be positioned to help you address. Although partnerships can be developed after an issue is chosen, they can also be developed as a part of the process of choosing an issue for learning and action. Not every place-based stewardship education effort is a linear process. As your students scan the community, for example, they may identify organizations, agencies, or specific projects that may be connected to the stewardship issue. As your students scan the community or consider which stewardship issues to work on, you can guide them to think critically about and record the resources that may be available to assist them in their project. As the adult, you may have a broader sense of potential partners than your students. And as you develop your place-based stewardship education practice, you may connect with an ever-growing list of partners. In both cases, you can position yourself as a community resource for your students' leverage. For example, you may help students make a connection to a potential partner, and you may even give that partner a little notice. But you can still allow your students to conduct the outreach to that partner and explore whether they'd be the right fit to assist or inform their stewardship project.
Before they can take action on a local environmental issue, students will need to build their knowledge and understanding of the specific situation and the solutions that could help. During this stage of the place-based stewardship education model, your students will engage with element 4, research your issue. At this stage, your students know what their chosen stewardship issue is. Together, you've identified relevant community partners, and you are now ready to dig into the options you have to realistically address the issue. Your chosen community partners will be valuable assets in helping you sort through what options are available to address your issue. They will likely be able to advise on length of project, relevant regulations and processes, tools and resources required, safety concerns, cost estimates, and what other partners or stakeholders will need to be involved. Again, it is important to allow students as much opportunity as possible to engage directly with these primary sources of local information. Doing so may require that your students conduct multiple rounds of interviews or invite partners to site visits. This stage of the process is also a wonderful opportunity to consider who within your school community might be able to assist with the research process. For example, if you work with elementary or middle school students, you may be able to collaborate with high school students to complete complex calculations or research technical information. Doing so could provide a powerful peer mentorship opportunity for both groups of students. In addition to the technical information you will need, this stage of the model invites you and your students to explore the other types of information you can gather to piece together a more complete issue of the place and issue you've chosen. For example, you may consult local Indigenous groups or individuals to offer their perspective on the place, the issue, the historical context, and the management or solutions they would consider. You could also research local history to better understand what policies, practices, or other forces contributed to your chosen issue, and how you might address those forces in your project.
Once you've identified your issue, selected and engaged with relevant community partners, and conducted research on the issue and the options you have to address it, it's time to implement Step 5 of the Place-Based Stewardship Education Model, Complete an Action Project. At this stage, you and your students should have the information necessary to shape and execute an action project, the resources needed, the likelihood of success, and the appropriateness of chosen actions. You should lay out a realistic timeline for your action project, taking into consideration that you should build in time for adjustments, poor weather, and other unforeseen complications. Stewardship projects are not always completed without issue. Also consider what the best time of year is for your project and where you are already within that school year. What are your best options for implementation? Once you've decided on a timeline for your project, allow your students to guide the process of selecting and assigning project roles. Allow for as much student voice and choice as possible during this stage of the project. Ensure that each student has a valuable role to play by helping to design a diversity of roles, from project action to documentation to communication. Next, complete your action project over days, weeks, or even months. If you're new to place-based stewardship education, it's okay to begin small. Guide your students to select projects that can be completed in just one or a few outings. As you build your practice, you will grow more comfortable with complex projects that take longer periods of time to complete, and how to weave your various learning objectives into different phases of the project. Also consider what your approach will be to project failure. Will you build in time and capacity for students to reevaluate and attempt their project again? Will you end the project abruptly if failure occurs? Having a plan for how you and your students will navigate not being able to take successful or complete action on your issue will be important to helping students see the worth of the attempt, the lessons learned, and the authenticity of how failure is very much a part of the real world, especially when working with complex issues.
Once you've completed an action project, it is critical to allow students plenty of time to reflect on the project, including the steps and processes they went through, the outcomes of their work, and the questions they have moving forward. This part of the learning process is critical to meaning making. Students may begin the reflection and sharing process internally with one another. Students can reflect on their roles as well as their individual challenges and accomplishments. Reflecting, sharing, and celebrating together as a team deepens student ownership of the process and project outcomes. Once your students have reflected on their action project, have them consider how best they'd like to communicate their project outside of the classroom and who their target audiences will be. One of the strengths of working with project partners is that they become a built-in, highly relevant audience for sharing with. Since the students have ideally already engaged with project partners, they may be excited to circle back and showcase their work for these local experts. Also consider who from within students' communities and neighborhoods would make for relevant audiences. Could they invite families to learn about and engage with their project? Perhaps the local media would be interested in running a story about the students and their project. Once you've done the hard work of a stewardship action project and have an outcome to share, your community will likely be interested to learn from your students and to celebrate their efforts. Guiding your students to find an authentic, meaningful audience for their work is an important part of solidifying the relevance and personal meaning of their stewardship work and learning.